Hey, it's Anna. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about my top 20 reads of 2023. I have quite a few physical books to go over, but I also have ebooks and audiobooks that made it as a part of the top 20 books. These are all 5-star reads, so I've only had 25-star reads in the year of 2023. I'm really excited to talk about all of these, and I'm curious to see if any of our 5-star reads are the same, so definitely let me know. My first 5-star read of the year was a YA thriller by Holly Jackson, 5 Survive. I would absolutely love to go back to this universe. I feel like people might not like this if they're not a fan of Holly Jackson or if they're not a fan of, again, that YA thriller. 5 Survive follows 6 teens. Obviously, 5 survive, so we already kind of know what's going to happen going into it. And these 6 teens are all trying to take a road trip, like a spring break trip, in an RV. It's really cool because you actually get a map of the RV at the very beginning, and I wouldn't have even thought to include this ever, but it really helped me picture what was going on in the RV the entire time. So this definitely helped my visualization. I feel like it helped me enjoy the book. So really the main character that we're following in this, her name is Red, and she and her 5 friends, their RV breaks down. There is a sniper that is following them in the woods, and they have to stay in this RV, and the sniper is demanding a secret from somebody in the RV in order to release them so that they can go. And I really liked this book. I loved how twisty it was. Red is kind of a chaotic type of narrator to follow, and I feel like that only heightened my senses while reading this book. And then for me, one of the reasons that this sticks out as a 5-star read is because I feel like typically you can guess how the book's going to end, and I did, but then I talked myself out of it because Holly Jackson was so good at laying out so many clues and so many possibilities. So while the ending, I was still surprised by it, I liked that I was still able to pick up on clues to eventually guess the ending, but she still kept me guessing the entire time. So definitely a 5-star read. Holly Jackson is one of my favorite authors. I do plan to talk about her in future videos, so might be a little more biased on this one, but she's definitely one of my top authors. Speaking of top authors, we have Lizelle Samsbury's Blood Like Fate. This was my second 5-star read this year. I absolutely adore this book. This, for sure, still my favorite 5-star read of the year. I was absolutely engrossed in this story. I still remember so many facts from this book. I really just love Lizelle's writing style. Now, this is the second in a duology. The first book, Blood Like Magic, I believe I gave a 4 out of 5 stars just because the first 100 pages of Blood Like Magic were just such heavy world building, and I feel like not too much happened. So going into Blood Like Fate, you already know what type of world you're in. You already know who the characters are. You already have that familiarity, and I feel like that sold me on this book even more. I wanted to continue the story. I felt like the story wasn't resolved from Blood Like Magic, so I'm glad there was a second book, and I really feel like this has so many qualities that I enjoy. Twisty mysteries, following characters that I feel like I can relate to, having more backstory, getting the backstory for all of these characters. There was so much in here that I thoroughly enjoyed. So I'm going to try to talk about this book without spoiling it, if that makes sense. I'm going to try, and I might end up talking more about Blood Like Magic than I actually do Blood Like Fate, but know that they're interconnected, obviously, because they're a duology. So we follow Voya in both books. Voya is somebody who, her magic is not presenting itself in a traditional way, and Blood Like Magic really follows her journey for that untraditional magic. And in the second book, because Voya has this untraditional magic, it puts her in a unique position of power that she never thought she had to navigate. She is also very close with some humans. She is a witch. Typically, they don't really mix that well, so Voya also has to navigate her feelings and relationships with the humans around her. She also has to find her place within the witch community now that she's in this unique position of power. There's sci-fi in this, even though everything I just described was more like kind of fantastical, magical realism aspect, and I felt extremely satisfied by the ending of this book. So again, no spoilers. I really enjoyed this book. I feel like if you read Blood Like Magic, you'll get hooked into Blood Like Fate. I bought them as a box set, and I'm so glad I did, because if I had to wait for this book, I don't know how people initially waited for this book. I feel like I just would have gone feral. So second 5-star read of the year has definitely been my favorite read of the year so far. But we still have 18 more 5-star reads to go. The next 5-star read is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. I adore Angeline Boulley's writing. I also really did like Warrior Girl Unearthed. That's kind of the second book in this Firekeeper's Daughter's universe. But Firekeeper's Daughter I liked more simply because I felt more satisfied by the ending. It felt like a standalone, didn't necessarily advertise it was going to be a series. I also really really liked the main character, Donis. I feel like it was complex while still feeling realistic in a fiction book, and I feel like you learned so much about Ojibwe culture in this book that it was also a learning experience while being a thrilling read. So Firekeeper's Daughter, we follow 18-year-old Donis. She is biracial. She is half Ojibwe and half white, and she never really felt like she fit in at all. And she gets roped into investigating how drugs are getting onto Sugar Island, the Ojibwe reservation. And she gets roped into this scenario because she wants to make sure that everybody is safe. She really cares about everybody, but it's definitely more than she bargains working with the FBI in order to find out how these drugs are getting onto the reservation. I thought it was extremely thrilling. I thought there was a big mystery behind it. I couldn't predict how it was going to end at all. And I feel like that is kind of a common theme with my 5-star reads, is having endings that you see clues for but still shock you at the end and keep you reading until the very, very last page. This was a book that I could not stop listening to. I was surprised at how much I wanted to keep listening to it instead of reading my physical books, because this year I feel like I've been reading more and more physical books. So when an audiobook can really encapsulate my attention, that's when I know it's going to be one of my top reads. I really love the audiobook narrator for this too. I feel like I learned the pronunciation of Ojibwe words properly. It's the same audiobook narrator for Warrior Girl Unearthed, so I feel really comfortable listening to her read the book to us. So definitely 5 out of 5-star read in the audiobook format for sure. I just want to say, I'm holding this book, I'm not addressing the book yet. I want to say that I understand some people are going to say that this book was extremely predictable to them. And to that I say, really good for you. It was not predictable for me. I don't know if I didn't pick up on certain clues. I don't know if I just haven't read enough thrillers for thrillers to be predictable, but I already know somebody's going to say that this book was so predictable and not 5 stars to them, and that's okay. I think that just means you're better at figuring out puzzles than me. But this is a 5-star read for me. The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, and I absolutely could not put this down. I read it in a day. I was so enthralled. I did not see any twists or turns coming. I feel like Frida always shrouds her characters in mystery. You're suspicious of everyone. I was suspicious of the little girl in this book. I thought the little girl had lots and lots of dark secrets. And I feel like she still kind of does, but not as much as I was thinking. Like, the little kid is not like a murderer or anything. I don't know if that's a spoiler, but the child does not murder anybody. So in The Housemaid, we follow Millie. She is looking for employment, and she luckily gets hired by the Winchesters. She does have a criminal background, so she can't necessarily work a traditional job. And in the Winchester household, she begins to have a sneaking feeling about the wife, the husband, the kid is even creepy, and Millie realizes that she potentially bit off more than she could chew cleaning this house, and she doesn't know exactly if she's going to be able to get out of this employment unscathed. I love Frida's writing. I am lucky enough, I think, to be on the PR list for Frida McFadden's books. I've gotten 2 from them this year. I absolutely adore her. I will talk about her books on and on and on, and this was a 5-star read for me. Again, I was so shocked. I felt like it was such a fresh thriller. I couldn't predict the ending. I didn't know what was going to happen. I feel like all the characters were complex. Nobody was really one way or the other in terms of personalities. You couldn't really predict anything, in my opinion. And I gave this a 5 stars. And then I thought, oh, I know she's coming out with a second book for this one. I bet it's not going to be as good as the first. And you know what? I ate my words, because this is also a 5-star read for me. The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden is also a 5-star read. And if you say this book is also predictable, then I really think you are just really good at figuring out puzzles, or maybe you've read way more thrillers than I have. I can see how predictable this is, because The Housemaid's Secret, I feel like, is completely different than The Housemaid. I don't know how somebody could have predicted both of those. It just shocks me. Like, it's so amazing to me that people can predict these things. Obviously, Frida's the one that wrote it, so I know people can figure it out, but it still amazes me. So The Housemaid's Secret is a sequel to The Housemaid. I guess there'll be some spoilers, but I really feel like you can just read both of these, and I feel like I'll tell you the description. I don't think it's necessarily a spoiler, but just something to keep in mind. So The Housemaid's Secret, we still follow Millie, our main character from book 1, as we typically do in series. We follow the same main character, and Millie is in a new place. She's looking for new employment, and she gets hired by the Garricks to clean their home. And this this time she gets a sneaking suspicion about the Garricks, and she has been hired out for work between the housemaid and the housemaid's secret. So she thinks she's there for a particular reason, but Millie quickly finds out that this is a situation unlike anything she has dealt with before, and she's not sure if she's going to be up to the task for what the Garricks have in store for her. 5 out of 5 stars. I typically don't rate books in a series all 5 stars, but I felt like this was still so fresh. It still gave me a lot of the same vibes as The Housemaid, where it was twisty. I was suspicious of everybody, but in this book I actually knew some of the characters that we saw, so I feel like I was more connected to this book, and it doesn't follow the same pattern as The Housemaid, in my opinion. I feel like they are 2 books that can really stand on their own, and it's not, for example, like series where you're always fighting the same villain and you know what the outcome's going to be. They always win in the end. That wasn't the vibes that I got from this book at all. I feel like it had a completely different ending compared to The Housemaid, and I know there's a 3rd one in the series coming out now. I am so excited for that one to come out next year. I am curious if that one is going to live up to the 5-star streak that the Housemaid series so far has had for me. Okay, we gotta switch up our vibes a little bit here. I've talked a lot about thrillers, some YA, some adult, talked about some mysteries, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi. This is the first 5-star read that is a romance. It's by Jasmine Guillory. I have read every single Jasmine Guillory book. I adore Jasmine Guillory's writing. I think her writing is encapsulating. 2 of Jasmine Guillory's books are 5-star reads, but one I read last year, so this 5-star read is for 2023, which is By the Book. This is part of the Meant to Be series, where they have authors rewriting fairy tales in a more modern sense. This By the Book follows the kind of Beauty and the Beast story. So, I mean, if you know Beauty and the Beast, you're gonna know how this story goes. And I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because I read this so fast. I am not the biggest Beauty and the Beast fan. I'm definitely more of a Little Mermaid girl, but I was so enthralled by how Jasmine took a classic story and really made it so modern, where I felt like the characters were complex. I think taking on the story where somebody is literally a beast is challenging enough, especially to make it engaging and fresh, and I feel like she does it very, very well. So By the Book, we follow Isabel, and she works at a publishing company, and this publishing company is supposed to be publishing Beau Towers' memoirs. Beau Towers was a childhood star, I think along the veins of like Lindsay Lohan, and so they really want Beau's memoir because they feel like it's going to reveal a lot about him. So Isabel has a publishing conference. She ends up being in somewhat of the same area as where Beau lives. She drives out to where Beau lives, knocks on his door, and he agrees to start writing his memoir, because of course he hasn't started it, only if she stays with to help him. And that's where we kind of get those Beauty and the Beast vibes still around the book. The characters are obviously people of color, another big switch from the Beauty and the Beast books, and I feel like Jasmine Guillory writes characters so well. I loved every side character. I thought it was fast-paced. I thought it was realistic, even though it was a romance book with a little bit of a fantastical scenario. I feel like the conversations they had were real, and I absolutely just adore the way Jasmine Guillory writes. So I think this is well-deserved as being one of my top 20 books of 2023. I would definitely recommend the entire Meant to Be series. I haven't read the latest one, but I really want to read the latest one because it's based off The Little Mermaid, so that might also be another 5-star read in the Meant to Be series. The first book from the Meant to Be series, If the Shoe Fits, is a Cinderella story, and I gave that a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't think anybody is really shocked by this one. I will say for Divine Rivals, I was able to meet Rebecca Ross, so this is a signed copy, which I am so lucky to have. I actually didn't read this book physically. I listened to it on audiobook and fell in love with the audiobook narrators there, fell in love with the story, and I am not the biggest romantasy girly, and I feel like this got me kind of started into that realm. In Divine Rivals, we follow Iris as she is navigating the world, trying to move up in her newspaper company, trying to figure out her home life situation. Her brother's out on the war front fighting a war for the gods. Her mother isn't really in the best state of mind, and so Iris is trying to figure out her life, and she finds a typewriter that belonged to her grandmother, and she starts to type a letter, and she puts it under the door of her closet thinking it's going to go to her brother. It does not go to her brother, it goes to Roman Kit. Who is Roman Kit, you ask? Well, of course it's Iris's newspaper rival at the job. Of course it is. And so Iris doesn't know that he's getting these letters, but he knows that it's Iris, and he is starting to respond. He admits that he's not the brother right away, but he doesn't reveal his identity. So Iris and Roman are developing this type of relationship via letters, even though Iris and Roman are still competing in person at the newspaper job. And it follows their story. It takes them to the war front eventually, which I I think just really ups the fantasy game in this book. I think this world is extremely unique, talking about the gods that were created, the war that's being held on behalf of them. This story also does have a little bit of mystery to it. It is pretty twisty. The ending has left me begging for Ruthless Vows for months. I was so happy when I went on the book tour and met Rebecca and she announced Ruthless Vows, I think at our stop, or she told us about it early. I was so happy. She initially had said it was coming out in April, but I feel like because of the popularity, they fast-tracked it to come out this year. So I'm hopefully going to pick it up right away in December, be able to read it super fast because I definitely listened to this audiobook extremely quick. I loved the narrators. I believe it's going to be the same narrators for the second book, but I do actually want to read it physically and see, did the narrators really influence my 5-star rating, or did I actually love the series just for the words in it? Because I do feel like audiobook narrators can influence how you like a book, and the 2 narrators for Divine Rivals did a beautiful job. So definitely 5 out of 5 stars with, again, the romance, the fantasy, the unique world. I can't wait to jump back into Ruthless Vows later this year. All right, we have what I think is a really interesting romance book, Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This was my first Kennedy Ryan book. I did a whole video talking about it because I buddy read this with a friend, Megan, and this was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. I didn't realize being married had such an impact on my life until I started having conversations with some unmarried friends and until I started reading books related to marriage. I didn't realize how much my marriage with my husband is something that I truly treasure. It definitely feels different than just dating, and I feel like this book really explores the complexity of what marriage and love can look like. I felt like the hype of this book was definitely real. I adored the side characters. I'm so excited to go back to this universe next year. So we follow Yasmin and Josiah. They have been divorced for 2 years, and they've had 2 years to kind of work through some traumatic situations that affected both of them. And now they're really starting to consider, while co-parenting, what the future of their relationship looks like. I feel like while in general, we know how romance stories are going to go, I think because of the divorce aspect of this book and because of the complexities in their relationship with co-parenting, I feel like it just really adds a level of maturity to this book that I appreciated. It added a level of just insight into how people can come back to each other and how you still have to work. Loving somebody is a choice, not necessarily just something that is instant, because there are tough days where you need to put the other person first instead of putting yourself first. And I really feel like this story does a beautiful job of encapsulating that. So definitely 5 out of 5. I feel like the past 2 books have been fairly big on book social medias. I believe in the hype of them. I don't know if you do, but I definitely do. Okay, now we're going to get into a string of audiobooks. I think I have maybe 2 or 3 physical books left, but the rest of these are audiobooks. The next book is Felix Ever After. This is a YA contemporary story. It has a ton of representation of different sexualities, of how people present themselves, and so I really appreciated all, again, the learning lessons that can come from reading these fictional books. You still learn lessons that you can apply to everyday life with interacting with people. So in this book, we follow Felix Love. He is entering his final year of school, and somebody is dead naming him and bullying him, but we're not sure who it is. And so Felix becomes obsessed with trying to figure out who this person is, and at the same time, one of his top suspects starts to actually become somebody that he has romantic feelings for. And so lots of subplots going on here. If you like complicated stories, this is definitely one of those where there are a ton of avenues for the story to go down. There are a ton of subplots, and in the end, we get to find out if Felix is happy or not, because that's the whole point of Felix going through all these trials and tribulations. He just wants to be himself, and he wants to be happy. So I would definitely recommend this book, even for that kind of like upper teen audience, like 16. You could go down to 14 too. It all depends on your choice. I don't feel like there's anything inappropriate in here. It's just some of the material I think is a little higher level than recommending it to like somebody who's 8, right? That's why it's a young adult book and not like a middle grade children's book. I also love the narrator for this. I listened to it on audiobook, so I would definitely recommend either format. I feel like it will translate great to whoever reads it. I really like these unique stories that have a lot of subplots and that teach me things along the way, similar to the vein of Firekeeper's Daughter, but just a little more contemporary in this case, I feel like, with, again, the representation, different sexualities, different ways of presenting people. I feel like this book has a lot of learning experiences, just like Firekeeper's Daughter had a lot of learning experiences with the Ojibwe culture. The next book is The Mirror Season, and this was a 5-star read, and with all the 5-star reads in the past, I feel like I've been able to explain really why I like them and give more concrete reasons. The Mirror Season, solely a vibes 5-star read. This is is a heavier topic book. It does deal with some triggering content, so definitely check that out before you read it. But there was just something about the way that the author wrote Celia's story that really just spoke to me. I feel like the magic and the fantasy aspects of this book were easily accessible via metaphors to me. I understood what was happening. I don't think everybody will. I don't necessarily think this is a 5-star read for everybody, but I do think it's an important read for everybody. I still feel like it has those mysteries and twists. You don't really know who to trust at all along the way. But again, there is that magic aspect and more of a contemporary story, and I feel like that can be hard for some folks to grasp onto. I didn't have a hard time with this one. I really, really enjoyed The Mirror Season. Again, I would definitely say this is more upper YA because it deals with such triggering content, but I still think it's a really important read and exploration on how somebody can deal with, terrible things happening to them. So we follow Ciela. She had a gift for knowing exactly what pastry somebody wanted when stepping into their family's pastry shop. But after a incident, she loses that gift and she needs to get it back. She really wants to be useful in the pastry shop again in that sense. What she gained instead was the sight of these mirrored shards that start just showing up. Nobody else can see them but her, and she's confused on why these shards are starting to appear. So she's trying to get her gift back, get rid of this new gift that she doesn't find a lot of use in. She knows that while an incident was happening to her, there was another incident going on in the next room to a boy, and when that boy shows up at school, Celia realizes that she has to deal with the demons of her past a lot sooner than she realistically wanted to. Because the boy goes to her school, she starts to talk with him, unraveling her emotions and unraveling what really happened to her that night. And it's definitely a ride that was sad, but I feel like I learned a lot by the end of it, and it was one of those stories that just tugged on your heart that I would definitely want to read again and read physically this time. I really want to read this book physically and be able to annotate it and really work on my thoughts on paper. Sometimes with audiobooks it's a little bit harder to do that, but I still really liked listening to it on audiobook. I feel like you could do either and still enjoy this story. But just know this is probably one where you definitely want to check the content warnings before getting into the book, but still a 5 out of 5 star read for me, one of my top 20 for sure. All right, we have another book that also is like a contemporary story that also deals with heavy topics. It's kind of sad, Becoming a Queen. And I guess The Mirror Season and Becoming a Queen right around the same time. There were a lot of similar vibes between these books. I don't know if I was just on a contemporary stories kick or what. I loved the audiobook for this specifically because the author reads it himself, and I feel like that can be hit or miss. This was a hit for me. You could feel the emotion in every word he said, all the good, all the bad emotions, and I feel like because he put so much of his soul into it, I felt like I could really relate to the book and I really enjoyed it. It was fast-paced. I still feel like there were multiple mysteries. I feel like it was complex not only with the main character but the side characters, and I feel like even though this is a fictional story, I feel like this is the most memoir format I feel like I've read, even though I know again it's a fictional story. It just felt so real. There's no necessary aspects of magic in this one as compared to The Mirror Season. I feel like every step of the way was so realistic, so grounded, so accurate to somebody's story. I'm sure this is somebody's story out there. I know the author, I think, based it on partly his real life, but I know that this is also probably so many teen stories out there. So many people can relate to this. I think it's a really good book about exploring yourself and identity. So let's get into what this book is about. So Mark is gay and Mark likes to wear dresses, and Mark had a boyfriend. The boyfriend didn't like that dressing up aspect part of Mark, so they decide to break up, and Mark has to really determine, who he wants to be. Does he want to be as open with the preferred feminine dress style? Does he not? And he also has to come to terms with, essentially bringing this up to his family of dressing more feminine. I feel like that's such a unique way because so many of us focus on the story of somebody coming out about just their sexuality, but there's so much more besides a person's sexuality that I feel like they almost have to come out with if it goes against societal norms. And I don't feel like that's fair. I feel like you should be able to be yourself without explanation as long as you're not, physically hurting somebody else or, being harmful towards others. So I feel like this book just had a lot of important messages. It deals also a lot with family dynamics. I think you should check the content warnings, but I don't think it was anything, too violent, too gory. Just a lot of sadness and emotion was brought into this book. So definitely a 5-star read. Lots of emotions behind this book still even today. All right, this is my second to last physical 5-star read of this year, On the Come Up. I really liked The Hate U Give. I want to read Concrete Rose. On the Come Up I feel like was so good. The movie did not do this book book justice at all. I did do a comparison of the movie and the book on my channel. The book is so much better. There are a lot of complexities that are dealt with on the come up because we follow Bree as she records this hit song. So Bree's song has a lot of deeper meanings to her that the media kind of takes and twists because they're not listening to the whole song. And so while Bree has, experienced some of the things that she raps about, she is portrayed in the media as living a very different life than what she actually lives. There are some love stories in here too. It talks about the family dynamics, Bree's relationship with her rise to fame, how it feels to be young and Black in America. And I really just overall love the storytelling of Angie Thomas. I think she is fantastic in terms of reminding us of what teens still go through every single day. Even though this is a fiction book, I feel like a lot of the scenarios were realistic, and I definitely could see this being somebody's story again out there. I feel like this was fast-paced, the complexities were there. I do feel like it was pretty wrapped up by the end as well, since this was a standalone. You could definitely read this before reading The Hate U Give because they take place in the same world. This is technically written after The Hate U Give in terms of the timeline, so I would recommend both, but I still feel like you can learn a lot of lessons from this contemporary YA book. All right, Meet Me at the Lake is a book that I thoroughly enjoyed. I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I liked this better personally, and I think for this adult romance book, I liked this better personally because I like the books where you have complex family relationships. I really like how you can jump back and forth between time. This book has all of that for me. So the premise is Fern goes back to her family resort after her mother tragically passes away, and Fern is responsible for bringing up this resort. Little did Fern know her mother was talking to a man named Will who comes up to help save the resort. However, 10 years earlier, Will and Fern shared an unforgettable day together, and now Fern has to kind of reconcile what happened that day and her relationship with Will, and if she really even wants to work at the resort because she has a real job in Toronto. So it's definitely something that Fern has to deal with, and also being back at the resort, she knows a ton of people from her past, so uncovering other past storylines as well. This was fast-paced, it was emotional, it felt raw, it felt real. I definitely cried during this book. I think this is the only 5-star book I cried to this year, was this book. But it was more about Fern's relationship with her mom, not really the relationship with the other main character, Will. I definitely have a soft spot for moms in books, and so I feel like that's definitely what got me with this one. So you don't have to read this one after reading Every Summer After. If you want to read this one first, they're two separate characters. They just both talk about stories on lakes. That's, I feel like, the really big similarity between the books. So I would definitely recommend this one. Again, we're back in more of like the romance book era, but I feel like the next book I'm going to talk about is something unique to any other 5-star read I've talked about yet. This was the first ebook that I rated 5 stars, and it is The Deep Sky. This is a unique sci-fi world. I feel like I haven't ever read a story like this. I feel like it is a big ol' space mystery. So again, more mysteries. Really like those complex characters with pasts and jumping back and forth between those pasts, trying to uncover the current day mystery. So in this story, we follow Asuka. She was part of a program where they are sending folks to a place called Planet X because the Earth is being depleted. And so they send this whole troop to Planet X. The plan was that they would be asleep for 10 years, they'd be awake for 10, and then go back to sleep for another 10, and they'd arrive at Planet X. While Asuka and another person is working on the ship on the outside, there is an explosion that occurs, and it moves the ship off course. So Asuka is not only tasked with finding out who set off this bomb that shot them off course, but then she's also pulled back into helping them get back on course to get to Planet X. Time is running out for both of these because the crew isn't sure if they're going to be attacked again or if they're going to be able to get back on course on time. So again, you get to see not only Asuka as the adult in the space station in this scenario, you also get to see Asuka as she's training at this academy to be one of the people that goes on this ship. So definitely jumps back and forth between time. I think it adds to the mystery. She really likes birds, so that is a part of this book. I feel like if you're scared of birds, you shouldn't read this book because she talks about birds a lot. But I feel like then the birds storyline that also is in there, like these little facts that are dropped along the way, really help with the mystery as well. So I really liked this ebook. I read it extremely fast, which I don't usually do with ebooks because I think I read this on my phone. And I feel like that's really hard to do. So I would definitely recommend it if you like more of that sci-fi world. I feel like this is my first true science fiction book of the year that was rated 5 stars. Blood Like Fate somewhat had that, but it also had a lot of aspects of magic. All right, surprisingly, I think the rest of the books are are pretty much romance one way or another, whether it's YA, new adult, adult romances. I feel like every single book has something along those lines. So while the beginning of the year I feel like was more heavy in thrillers and mysteries, it's almost like my brain wants something a little bit softer, a little bit more romantic. So it's interesting to see how my 5-star reads have kind of evolved over the whole year. And the first of this kind of like romantic series that we'll talk about is Ghosted. The cover sucks. I'm sorry. I can't put it around any other way. I think this cover is awful. I wish it got rebranded. I just don't think it's a good cover for me. However, I still picked it up because I was interested in the description, and I'm really glad I read the book because I feel like it was fast paced. I really liked the characters. I really liked the self-exploration of the female main character. So definitely something to keep in mind of not judging a book by its cover, because I almost definitely did that and would have missed out on one of my favorites of this year. So Hattie and her family live on the grounds of Northanger Abbey, which is the school that her mother runs that she and her brother attend. And she is putting on this facade of being extremely perfect, of being fine, but she did lose her paranormal loving dad earlier before they, really got settled at Northanger Abbey. The dad was so excited to explore all the ghosts that were apparently in the Abbey, and since his passing, Hattie hasn't really done anything related to ghosts. It's something she's avoided. So when Kit Moreland joins the school population, and he specifically came from like a paranormal loving background, and Hattie has to be his ambassador, she thinks it's the absolute worst case scenario. But she doesn't realize that Kit is extremely helpful to her, that he wants to understand her, he wants to help her process not only her grief, but all of the paranormal sightings. When they get paired up for a project together, Hattie thinks it's going to be the worst time. Of course, this is a romance, so it's really interesting to see how Hattie goes from completely hating the scenario she's in to the romance aspects of the books that do come later. This is a YA romance, nothing spicy in this book at all, and I really loved Hattie's exploration specifically with overcoming her grief with her dad and the relationship that she develops with her brother and her mother, because her mother is extremely strict in this book and definitely acts like a headmistress no matter where she goes, even at home. So I really think that the introduction of Kit was really good for Hattie in this book, and I just still get warm vibes whenever I think about this book. I really, really liked it. All right, next, and this is where I think it goes into new adult, is Honey and Spice, because we follow the main characters in more of a college setting. I think something that stuck out to me with Honey and Spice was the school politics that were held, because I feel like a lot of people talk about court politics in romance books, but the school hierarchy and who interacts with who, I thought was extremely interesting in this book. And I definitely think it made me listen to this audiobook, not want to turn it off. I thought the narrator was really great too. And I was really not expecting how the book ends up playing out. Even though it's a romance, I feel like I'm still surprised when I read certain romance books that just keep me on my toes. So Kiki has a radio show called Brown Sugar, and Kiki's mentor says that Kiki should really elevate brown sugar so that she can, use it for future applications, to get internships and whatnot. And in order to forward the show, the mentor recommends that Kiki works with one of the new kids on campus named Malachi. And Malachi is kind of shaking up the social hierarchy of the school. And while Kiki has never been any types of relationship girl before, her and Malachi enter a fake dating relationship that is supposed to be beneficial for both of them. And fake dating is one of my favorite tropes, as I'm learning. So of course with fake dating, you never really get what you appear to when you get into a fake dating relationship. And it's all about how Kiki and Malachi start to form a real relationship while also dealing with the entire school's eyes on them, because they talk about their relationship on Kiki's show Brown Sugar to add a new perspective to the show. So definitely interesting. 5 out of 5 stars for me. I think it also takes place in a unique setting. This is a different school setting than Ghosted was just set in, because it's, again, college, kind of that upper level. So I definitely appreciated reading this book, and I'm so happy I got the audiobook of it when I did, because I know the holds were kind of long on it. All right, we have 1 ebook left, 3 audiobooks of the top 20 books for me in 2023. The last ebook is The Design of Goodbye. This is such a complex story to me. I was definitely shocked while reading it, and I feel like the author did a great job of keeping us on our toes the entire time and making the relationship between the two main characters something we anticipated, but was not something I could necessarily predict. So Madison's mom leaves her at the age of 17, and Madison's kind of covering the secret from everybody. And so she's trying to deal with still continuing to fit in with school with her friends, who I think are terrible, and dealing with everything at home, but not being able to fully talk it out with her dad. And then this other kid named Liam, who there's a lot of rumors around around Liam comes to school, and Madison gets told that Liam has to tutor her in math because, of course, her grades are all slipping because she's constantly thinking about her mom. So it's all about Liam, this kind of outcast, and Madison starting a relationship, even though they both have very traumatic pasts/presents. And I feel like the way that these two interact is unique in a contemporary book. I feel like it definitely deals with heavier topics. I couldn't predict a lot that happened in this book, and so it definitely kept me on my toes. I don't think it's necessarily a mystery, but I feel like there was a lot of mystery in it that kept me reading, and I was really satisfied by the ending of this book too, which I feel like is important with standalones, is being able to feel satisfied and feel resolved at the end. So I would definitely recommend The Design of Goodbye, as I would recommend all the books on this list. The next 3 books, all of them had moments where I was just like giggling, kicking my feet, so excited to listen to the audiobook. With Fake Dates and Mooncakes, we follow Dylan. His mother passed away from cancer, so he lives with his aunt, and he wants to enter the mooncake contest in order to win more notoriety for his aunt's restaurant. And in order to do this, he has to work with his aunt while still juggling school and juggling their other financial troubles. And so Dylan helps out a ton at the restaurant. He ends up delivering an order to kind of a richer client. And this richer client is mad because there were spring onions in his food. And Dylan's like, "I'm so sorry, we'll compensate you," all of this. And the rude client's apparent boyfriend shows up behind the door. That boyfriend is named Theo, and Theo has to kind of talk down this richer client that's pretty upset with it. So Theo shows up the next day at the restaurant to apologize, and then Dylan and Theo start this type of friendship. Theo needs a fake date to a wedding, which Dylan agrees to, and Dylan starts to tell Theo kind of about his life and troubles, and Dylan starts to help, but in more ways than necessarily Dylan is asking. So they have to deal with their complex relationship of coming from 2 completely different worlds, and I just must say the mooncake competition, I think, is probably one of my favorite scenes I've read all year. I think it was done so well, kept me on my toes. I knew what I wanted to happen. I was screaming in my car reading it. So definitely so cute with this Fake Dates and Mooncakes. Again, another fake dating book. I mean, again, it's just one of those things where I feel like I'm starting to learn what types of tropes I like, so I'm gravitating towards those books, and I'm being rewarded with books that I do really enjoy. The second to last book is The Neighbor Favor. So this is one where I feel like it was a pretty unique premise. So Lily works in publishing, and she has this favorite book called The Elves of Ceridon. And The Elves of Ceridon, she learns eventually is going to be republished, and she finds the author's website and sends him an email. She's occasionally checked for this author's, website before, but hasn't seen anything until recently. She sends the author an email, and the author, N.R. Strickland, actually responds. So Lily and Strick actually strike up a relationship via email that one day Strick suddenly ends. Fast forward a little bit, and Lily is living with her sister Iris, and she starts to develop a relationship with the neighbor Nick. Nick is Strick, and Nick doesn't admit that when he meets Lily right away. So you have this point where a relationship is starting to develop between Nick and Lily. Nick eventually has to admit he's Strickland. He can't keep hiding it, and nobody knows what N.R. Strickland looks like when republishing this big Elves of Ceridon book, and so Nick really has to come to terms with what type of relationship he then wants to have with his readers as an upcoming author, and also who he wants to be with Lily. And Lily also has her own complexities that she's dealing with as well, and so I just really liked all the different storylines in this book. I love the lessons. I love seeing their relationship blossom in this unsuspecting way, and I feel like another subplot of this is that her sisters have a bet going with Lily that she can't find her own date for one of the sisters' weddings, and Lily really wants to prove them wrong, and so that's where Nick is supposed to help Lily find this date for the wedding, but of course they have their own relationship going on. It's just such an interesting premise for a book that I feel like keeps romances fresh for me. Like, it's not the same rinse and repeat in my opinion. So the last book, my most recent 5-star read, I did talk about in my most recent readathon, is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. Now, I've read 3 Talia Hibbert books. This has so far been my favorite. The other 2 books were around like 3.5 stars. This was definitely a knockout for me. We followed Dani Brown. This is the second in like the sister series, so Chloe Brown comes first and then it's Dani. And Dani is really excited for a symposium that she is going to go to with her idol, and so she has to prepare for that. She wants to figure out where she wants her career to go. On the other hand, Zafir is a security guard at the university Dani works at. He also runs a program called Tackle It, where he helps young rugby players, kind of figure out their social emotional learning and making sure that they understand that mental health struggles are something that they can get help for and they don't need to bury. So these two are friendly from the beginning of the book. And what really pushes their relationship to this fake dating level is that Zafir rescues Danny during a fire drill because Danny was stuck in an elevator, and the rescue of her goes viral on social media. It starts to help Zafir's business tackle it, get more attention, and Danny doesn't mind getting into a fake dating relationship with Zafir because she definitely wants the benefits that would come with it, but without being in an actual relationship. So Danny's scared of commitment. Zafir does realize he wants that, but he also wants to utilize the social media popularity to better his business. So again, it's not the most innocent values going into a fake dating relationship, but I do think it's nice to see that it's honest. And of course, real feelings start to get in the way for both of them, and both have to really figure out what they want to do as the social media popularity eventually dwindles and their feelings have only ramped up. So again, I feel like you could read this without reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I think you could still read Get a Life, Chloe Brown, but this doesn't necessarily like spoil too much. Like, Chloe is not really in this book very much. So again, you could kind of skip around, but I really like the portrayals of anxiety in this book and how folks dealt with it. I really love the emphasis on mental health. I love watching their relationship blossom. And of course, another fake dating book. So those are my top 20 books of 2023, all 5 stars. Again, did you and I have any similar ones? What's been your top read of 2023? Because I definitely want to read some other folks' top books of 2023 going into next year. And I'm really excited to see what other books come my way. And hopefully I can do one of these videos every year, but I don't know. I feel like I'm getting a little bit harsher as a rater. But again, I did recently have a few 5-star books, so I'm really interested to see where my own rating starts to go over the next few years.